Welcome, Nadene here. I'm thrilled to be interviewing a wonderful collaborator and comrade, Cristian Amigo, who is a composer, sound artist, designer, guitarist, producer, and educator. So Cristian is a sound faculty member in the Experience Design and Production program of CalArts School of Theatre. So CalArts is really probably my favourite university at the moment. I think it's really great. So I'm just going to talk a little bit with him about his life and his creative life. So welcome, Cristian.
Hi, Nadene, thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking this time to talk to us.
Sure.
So you have done a lot in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what brought you to music initially. What was the thing? Was there any particular moment when you were young that brought you to music?
Well, yeah, it's very simple back then. Before I had to do all of those things, My father was a really big fan of music, so I heard music my whole life. And he even had a radio show when I was a kid. Where he would play Latin American music in Connecticut on some radio station in New Haven. And so I heard a lot of different kinds of music since I can remember, since before I can remember. So it's like you become conscious that the music is already there. But a particular experience is, I think, when I was 8 or 9 years old, when I didn't play it, but a teacher, knowing that I was an immigrant, because it was kind of a loaded question too, now that I think about it, asked me, well, what is it that I want to be? And I didn't quite understand the question. And she said, well, what's the best thing that you could be? What's the best thing that you could possibly be? And my first thought was, oh, I could be a musician. And that just kind of stuck with me. So I didn't play then. I tried to learn how to play then, but why didn't I? Oh yeah, because I was given a guitar that the strings were like 3 inches off the neck, and I was 8 years old, and I thought, no, this is impossible, I can't do it. So I had to come back later and do it again when I was about 12.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. But I always wanted to play, and it was always around me.
Uh-huh. That's a long period of time to wait to do something.
It is, actually. I think, before that, gosh, it's hard to remember that long ago. I think that, in terms of like how I felt as a person, it was like, I just wanted to fit in. I was an immigrant, I had problems with language and all sorts of things coming to the United States. But, I wanted to fit in, so I wanted to see if I was good at sports. I was trying to find something that I might be good at. And I couldn't, sports was just okay. Actually, I wasn't very good until later when I didn't care anymore. And, but none of it had stuck really. So that's what I was doing between 8 and 12. Also, I was a Cub Scout, which I really liked. So that was really great. And in fact, I have artist badges from the Boy Scouts, the Weaglows, and the Scouts of America.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that must have been part of you building a community, a sense of community. Being part of the Scouts is really very much embedded in place, and people your age as well as mentors.
That's right. That's right. And for better or worse, because it was kind of a mixed deal back then. But I was always, that's when I started discovering that I had an affinity for drawing and for like that maybe that's the direction I should head, something more artistic, rather than conventionally business-like or becoming a lawyer or anything like that. Those things interested me too, but I just didn't know who I was. Like what are you going to become? What are you going to do with your life? That's what everyone's always asking. And how are you going to know at 12? I still don't know.
Still working.
I'm still waiting. Any minute it's going to happen. I'm going to have the answer.
And what sort of drew you to the more? Well, actually, let's just backtrack a little bit. So you immigrated. What age?
I was 3.
You were 3, and
3.
You came from
Chile.
From Chile.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I didn't speak any English. My first language is Spanish.
And your parents, how good was their English?
It was really almost. They had studied English, I guess, in high school, but that's almost next to nothing until you actually get to a place and start speaking. So they had to learn, and they were young, 21 and 22.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, young parents. Both their kids, myself and my sister, and so yeah.
Are you the oldest?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
So am I.
That's very particular, isn't it?
It can be. Definitely. And so how connected do you feel to Chile or Chilean culture?
Well, just as a preface to this question, it's like one of the things that came out of all of that asking questions were 2 things, actually. One was that to be a musician, and the other one was to get an education. Those are the 2 things that were really important to me. I had a lot of family who had gone to college in Chile, so education was really important. And I always saw that as like a value that came from my family, not necessarily from the culture.
Yeah.
So in that way, I think I feel Chilean. So I always had this idea that I had to become a professional or something somehow. I don't know whether that's really true or just kind of a pressure that's on me. But that's very Chilean to me. And also, I studied. I have a PhD in ethnomusicology from UCLA. And when I was studying, I was in a period of my life when I was trying to like reclaim all of those things from my past that I didn't know about. So I really did a deep dive into not just the music of Chile, but the music of the Southern Cone, so like the music of Argentina, Chile, Peru, Paraguay, Uruguay. And so, I formally studied and played in groups. I played in Afro-Peruvian groups. I played cuecas from Chile. I played folklore. And, in that way I feel connected and also distanced at the same time because you are who you are. Chileans, I meet Chileans and they go, "You're Chilean, aren't you?" And I say, "Yeah." And they go, "But something else, but different." I'm like, "Yeah, I know."
Because you grew up here.
Yeah, it's somewhere else. So so I am Chilean, but really, I guess really I'm an American.
Yeah.
I mean, in the best way, in the diverse way, in the way that you're just something new.
Well, I relate to that.
Yeah, right. Well, I guess we'll coffee myself, right?
Oh, already. Okay.
What are you going to do?
Never mind.
That's a typical musician thing.
Oh, yeah. I'm always throwing stuff everywhere.
You're right. I'm just
So I guess as you got older, I mean, you started playing guitar when you were 12.
Yes.
What brought you to feel like that was going to be your career for real, your professional life?
Well, I mean, it's a hard one because music is like, especially when you're a kid, I think music is magical in a particular kind of way. So it almost feels like it's not your life. It almost feels like a dream, or a place that you go to, that place in your emotional life or your creative life. So it was always hard for me to see it like as a profession in some ways. And I think it still is in some ways. So, well, when I started playing, when I was 12, it turned out that, I could play immediately. So, and not anything complicated, but I learned a few chords, and I already had the sound, and I already had the rhythm for it, and people felt it already. And so I really, I really was stimulated by that. That I could learn 2 chords. I learned 2 chords and got a gig, actually, a professional gig.
Oh, wow.
And I accepted it, and then I went to the gig and I could only play 2 chords, so it didn't work out. But I had fooled them because I had played my 2, I played my songs, my funky songs, and I had that really funky red hand, and not everybody had that at the time, so it was kind of unusual. This was in Miami.
Oh, Miami.
And in Miami they appreciate groovy music, so.
Absolutely.
And so it was so easy that I just kind of fell into it. Mm-hmm. And then it became hard. After those 2 chords, it's been hard ever since. I think it was C and F. F is hard. No, it must have been C and G because F, I remember that bar. The 2 finger, the finger on 2 strings. That seemed like it would never happen.
Yes. Yeah, I tried.
A lot of people start at F.
And I was like, let's just go back to viola. So you got that first gig, and then.
Oh yeah, and then.
How did you fall into college and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, of course, because I got the first gig and I was into education. So what happened was, I started learning. So I started studying, taking private lessons. But at the same time, the tradition of the guitar is not private lessons. It's really very public or very folkloric in a way if you think about it. Really, people learn how to play the by themselves because a lot of the great masters never even took lessons. So I learned both ways. And I was fortunate to have good early teachers. By the time I was 14 or 15, I was teaching at the local music store. So I was giving guitar lessons, like to beginners and to kids. And also I was teaching the guitar classes and music theory class at my high school. Because the teacher, he trusted me, but he didn't want to do it. So he gave me the job.
Oh my God!
Yeah, right. But I took advantage of it, and learned. So I've been teaching since I was a kid as well. And then I went off to college. I studied classical guitar, but I wasn't. And I was okay, just kind of like middling, really. Mm-hmm. But I was accepted into the university because of it at Florida State University, where I studied with Bruce Holzman, who's one of the great classical guitar teachers in America, I think. I think he had high hopes for me, but I really liked the electric guitar, and I really liked other kinds of music. I played classical guitar kind of. I don't know why, just because I love the music, because I love Bach, and I still love Bach, and I love Baroque music, especially, and classical music. But really, my feelings were more toward more popular forms of music, especially jazz. When I was 16, I heard Miles Davis, and I heard Thelonious Monk, and that really changed everything for me.
Right.
Yeah, that changed.
Set you on in that direction.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing. When you discover that, it seems like you really discovered something.
It's a different world.
It's a different world. Yeah.
Especially if. I started in classical music, and it wasn't until I was 17 and went to college studying classical music that I discovered. To be true, I'd been listening to Sarah Vaughan and things like that. Just odd things were coming up in my life, but really being exposed to other musicians playing jazz did not happen till I went to college. And then it was a revelation.
Yeah. A revelation for so many reasons, right? Yeah. The cultural setting.
Yeah.
The people who are playing it. the sound, the creativity of it. I really liked. I wasn't ever really good at memorizing things, particularly good.
Yeah.
So I liked it. So improvisation is really good for me.
I'm the same. Yeah.
So I can chain together ideas, or associations and things without having to intellectualize it too much. I don't know. It just really fit me. Plus, I thought, at that time, the only people that were cool who had invented the term were jazz musicians. So, lawyers were not cool. Mechanics were not cool. Computer people were not cool. Not like now. Everybody's sort of hip and awesome and beautiful. But only Miles Davis was cool.
Yeah.
Birth of the Cool. That's one of his records.
Yes.
So it's like, that kind of, I don't know, that kind of swagger and that kind of, it was all very fascinating to me. That kind of confidence that I would see in him, or like Monk or somebody. That self-confidence in what they were doing, and understanding that they were making art at the highest level, despite all of the problems that African American people have in this country. Despite all of that, they somehow had
that
come to
supreme
the very top. They had achieved the
self-confidence.
supreme position just because of their talent, just because of their capacity to learn and study and transform notes into art. So that was very that was very important to me, because classical music always, just for my personality, really, because I love it, but the practice of it was not very interesting to me.
Yeah.
I think I enjoyed listening to it more than I enjoyed
playing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. How important do you think, in creative fields, do you think it is to have a foundation of, classical music and jazz has deep traditions, and how important do you think studying in that context is important to developing? Do you think it's necessary to study before you develop your own style, or is that something that's innate to individuals?
I think it is innate, actually. I think if you play enough, that you start breaking through to that point, whatever that means. Sometimes it's in a way that surprises you. Sometimes in a way that is not satisfying to you even. Sometimes it's really satisfying. But I think if you play long enough, then you start playing, you're bound to do things differently, as a consequence of your practice. The way you think about sound, the way you organize, how you think about sound, the way you play your instrument, the way you listen. I don't know. That's a complicated question, because I'm also currently I'm a professor at Cal Arts, and I teach music composition, sound design, and audio production. So it's a mixed bag, really. I mean, for me, study is crucial, which is also why I became an academic. So if I want to know. I don't know if I want to know about this glass and what it's made of. My personality is that I'll investigate everything about it. Everything about it, how it's made, where it's mined. You know what I mean? I said, look, I want to know everything. But some people can just look at it and say, oh, I'm just going to make a glass. Ooh, and they make a beautiful glass. And you're like, well, everybody's just different. And then some people, I was thinking of some students recently. I had a student who was a costume designer, decided she wanted to be a sound designer. And she's only done 2 mixes so far, and they're like the best first mixes I've ever heard. As good as anything I've ever heard. And I thought, wow, this person has talent that they don't even know about. They can't even articulate exactly what it is, but they have a vision. They're able to take patterns in the world, maybe from their costume designing and everything else, and all of a sudden put it into sound practice. or a music practice, and something actually comes out, something that you feel there's something there. You know, so it's hard to say. So some people are naturals, you know, and they don't have to think about it. Other people need study to open up that naturalness. You know, I think for me, I started really fast, and then I think I slowed down for a while because I encumbered myself. You know, because I wanted to be something that I wasn't. You know.
Oh yeah.
Like we all do. And so that's an encumbrance, really, instead of just studying and just doing your best and seeing what happens, you know, and seeing what opportunities come up with what you have to offer the world. You know? So yeah, so that thing about study, you know, I think that used to come up a lot. I think in the 80s too, when they were talking about when it was like the new jazz musicians versus the old jazz musicians, and you know, the idea that a jazz education at a college is really thorough, especially now. It's like a minor science or something. You know what I mean? It's like it's super stratified. Here are the chords. Here are the scales. Here it goes what with what. But the truth is that those classic jazz musicians did not think that way. You know?
That's true. Yeah.
They studied those things, but not systematically as a system. That you know, maybe John Coltrane, people like that started to. Yeah. But those masters did not approach their music that way. So, and you can tell.
There's a fluidity.
Their fluidity, their energy.
I mean, they have access to everything.
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting to think about how in improvisation or any creative, you know, whatever we're doing, writing, whatever we're doing, if it's performance or any other thing, is how to find a deeper way into your sense of connection to your creative life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. That's hard.
It's hard, but when it happens, it's like, that's it.
That's it.
Can you describe maybe an instance of that recently that you could?
Yeah, it's not so recent, but it's with someone that we know together, with David Arnett Cherry, when I was playing in his groups in LA. That was before I went to New York even. We used to play at the Knitting Factory and places like that. And play with Jazz Festival. We played a lot with Justo Amadio and Don Littleton and Reggie Carson, that group of folks in LA. And I remember that David had asked me to be in his group. I had known him. Actually, I had known him since he was like a student at Cal Arts. So really pretty young I knew him. I wasn't at Cal Arts then, but I knew that he was a student at Cal Arts. And he was cool that way, that Cal Arts way. That Cal Arts jazz way.
Yeah.
And so he asked me to be in his group after hearing me play. And he gave me a bunch of charts, a bunch of music to study. And so we had rehearsals, and we had 3 or 4 rehearsals, and I went to these rehearsals, and I got through the pieces, and it was just okay, I didn't feel like I had done such a great job. But I felt like I was ready, not to take the music to another level. Mm-hmm. And then we went to the gig, I think it was at Catalina's, the jazz at Catalina's, and we got on stage, and the set was about to start, and I said, "Hey David, so what's the set list?" And he said, "Oh, just do your thing, man. Just do your thing." I was like, "What do you mean, do your thing?" I said, "Which of these songs?" He said, "Oh, I don't know if we're going to play those songs or if we're going to play something else." And so I was like, And so the band started playing, and I started playing too, and I realized that it was a really great space for me to inhabit. And it was the first place where I ever played music in a free way, where people were like, the people in the group understood how to react to it, and were receptive to it, and encouraged it. So that was really eye-opening. It was quite a test too, to get into the group. to put me through those paces, and then to say, okay, now do the thing that you do, and let's see what happens. So that was eye-opening. That was very magical for me, and that really got me into improvisation. And not improvisation; it got me into free improvisation, because I had improvised before that, but in a very either like in a rock way, or like a modal way, kind of, and not really like or like a jazz way, playing over changes and learning melodies and things like that, which I wasn't really very particularly good at. But this other way of playing was really good for the way that I played and the way that I felt, and so that was really eye-opening for me. Yeah, I won't forget that experience. That's good.
What a great memory.
Yeah.
Do you think, is there some way that there's a crossover in your life between your professional creative world and your regular rest of it?
Some crossover.
Or is it very much enmeshed? Is it all together? Or is there separation?
I am so enmeshed. I can't say it's in creativity all the time, because I teach, so that takes a lot of my time, and I work hard to be a good teacher, to be the best teacher I can be. I used to think, when I first came to LA, it was typical. I was 22 years old. I had $50. I slept on the floor of a friend of mine from high school. They were in a heavy metal band, so I basically lived with a heavy metal band for 2 months. Yeah. When I moved to LA, no money. Just your typical, just horror stories. Yeah. So I had to get day jobs, whatever that meant, for a while. And I always used to fantasize about, I can't wait till it's always creative, or this and that. And now that it's all creative, sometimes I long for, I try to make a connection with regular life more. Because all of a sudden I feel like if you're just making things, what do you have to write about? What do you have to relate to? Like, you're going to write a song about writing songs? Or a songwriter writing songs? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a little bit odd. So I appreciate being able to follow my path as a career, but sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming. And I'm longing for, as I get older, I think I'm longing for a different relationship to my art. Maybe different than when I was 12. I think about the outdoors. I think about creativity in a larger way. Because I've practiced other things. I've been a theatrical sound designer. I've done immersive sound, soundscapes. So I make a lot of sounds that don't actually have anything to do with sort of traditional music theory at all. So sometimes thinking about art as design. One of the things that's really eye-opening for composers is to introduce them to design, and then some of them become designers because they've never been exposed to the idea that their creativity could be in the service of someone else other than themselves.
So can you just for people who don't sort of have a background in sound design, can you define what that is?
I think for me and this is not even about sound design, it's about design, is that what you make has a function, rather than it comes from me because I have this feeling that I'm the loneliest person in the world and I want to express my heart through a romantic paradigm from the 19th century hero, blah, 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 how I feel at the moment. All of a sudden, it doesn't matter how you feel at the moment. It matters more how am I going to help somebody else, or how am I going to do something for someone else other than myself. So it gets you out of your ego in a way that's very eye-opening for young people, because they've never thought about that. They've always thought that I have to make music because I love it and because it's who I am and it's my identity, and it's very rigid that way. But all of a sudden, I put them in a situation where they have to think in different terms. And when you make them think about function and designing like an installation or a geo-mapped sound design, which is a sound design that you do via apps out in the world. So when people walk into places, you've made a sound design for them of a space. So when we do all those kinds of things, it takes us beyond our egos, and that's very satisfying to me. Is a space beyond. I want to be a musician just because it's my identity. And for me, at this point, it's not really enough.
Yeah.
So function. So my students make, they make games for children to run through and geomap things. They make informationals for parks. They do park tours. They do bus stations, train stations, fields, places of memory. We do pieces for the Henry Mayo Clinic in Santa Clarita. So we do things for healthcare, and all of these projects take a lot of study and a lot of thought, a lot of delicacy. And all of a sudden, that's way different than thinking, okay, what chord and what scale am I going to use?
Yeah,
that's a whole different way of existing in the world.
It's another. It's deeply rooted in community.
Yeah, deeply. Yeah, and the socialness of it.
Because
and also one of the reasons, one of the reasons I started working in theater. Well, there's a couple of reasons. The most practical reason is that I was living in New York and not making very much money playing free jazz. I'm not running free jazz. Thus the title, I guess. Free jazz. Everyone thinks it's free. But there was a lot of work in the theater, of course.
Yes.
So I was composing music for theater pieces, and then I realized that design was just an extension of that. And so I did that a lot before I came back to California to Cal Arts. So yeah, so for me, that's the biggest distinction. It's just function over ego. All of a sudden, when you think about function, you're thinking about the community. You're thinking beyond yourself. And I don't mean it in a super superficial way. Like I'm just going to do gun first person shooter games, stuff like that.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about like stuff, stuff that's local. And when you get into design, what's really empowering for people is that it doesn't have to function at an international level. It can function in your neighborhood, or it can function in your in your city in Santa Monica or in Santa Clarita or at a hospital or at a school so it changes the paradigm a little bit.
It does, and I also, it really speaks to me of the Western concept of the artist, which is very exclusionary and I guess hierarchical. It's the artist is separated from the audience. The artist is there is no communion. There's something which is the art, is the product that is sort of sponged up by the audience. They're very very passive.
Very passive.
And I think that's something I've been considering lately, is how artists, and I notice this even in things like grant applications and what is being encouraged to be funded, in that having an artist embedded in community and working with members of the community in a meaningful way, not just in the performance aspect, whether it's working towards a performance expression or actually doing workshopping kind of engagements and series and that are not just one-off engagements necessarily, that can be really interesting and also nourishing to more than, I guess we expect that the financial aspect of being engaged to do a performance, you get paid a certain amount, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah.
Whereas to be of service is a different. It's a little bit associated with what you were talking about.
Yeah, it gives you it gives you another point of meaningfulness or something.
Yeah.
That you just can't get from just exercising your own ego all the time.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you do have to go through all that self-examination to be an artist. But at this point in my life, I'm not particularly interested in myself because I know all the stories already. You know what I mean? Like, I'm interested in other things. I'm not even really a good evaluator of what I do anymore because I just do things.
I think that is really important. To be creative, to let go of the critical voice. I mean, it's just not helpful in definitely at the stage of creation. The critical voice.
And I see the pressure, and I see the pressure on us when we were younger too, because I see all these students all the time, and they all want to be geniuses, but whether you're a genius or not, it's not really a decision for you to make. It's not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not really.
It'll either be apparent or not.
and maybe you're a genius in some ways and not other ways, or maybe you're not a genius like Miles Davis, whose genius was so overwhelming that it overwhelmed the whole world, and whose timing, whose everything, whose moment in play. He was at the right time, the right place, the right person, everything. It's impossible. On quantum level, it's impossible what happened, and it happened. But maybe we all have a little bit of genius in particular in some areas. But these kids already come in worried. Imagine you're only making art for 3 or 4 years, and then you go to school and you're already worried about being a genius. That's really not something to be worried about.
Incredible
you gotta
pressure.
Learn how to paint. You gotta learn how what a compressor is, what a fuzz pedal does. There's a lot to learn. So just if you love that process, then you're gonna love being an artist. If you're just doing it just to become rich and famous, which is the paradigm, which is part of the problem, because it's the only model that young people see and that we saw too. It's like only the most successful, most visible people seem to have legitimacy, and we all have a problem we all have a difficulty with that because we don't all inhabit that model, because it's not really possible or healthy or even or probable, or it doesn't even fit your personality. So they all want to be geniuses. When I was a kid, everyone wanted to be a rock star. And so I wanted to be a rock star too because there wasn't any other model.
Yeah.
There wasn't. It was just there's no model, and so it takes a long time to realize that you have to, invent something outside of that model, because I don't fit in that model. I was not meant to be a rock star.
Oh, same.
I don't have that thing.
I didn't have the rock star thing. I think I wanted to be a jazz singer.
Oh, nice.
Once I switched from classical music to jazz and decided I was going to make that my life. I wanted to be like Sarah Vaughan. Sure. I wanted to have all the chops and all the lusciousness, all of the
Sarah Vaughan,
the whole bit. But of course that takes years to cultivate, and I'm not her.
You're you.
and I'll never be here. Yeah, but it takes a long time to actually start looking at simple things like the sound of your voice, the sound, appreciating that fingerprint that we all have.
That's right.
With our medium. And working at refining the expression of that. I mean, I really think that is so important to get there. And as you say, it's not necessarily through study that you get there and emulation, though it can happen as part of the journey, but by practice it can happen. That is really where I think you learn how to implement, by performing we learn how to perform.
Right.
We learn our biggest lessons, and by getting up and doing it time after time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's a really good point. And in fact, one of the things that I emphasize even to my students, because I've been able to do it to myself, because I have a formal education, and two, because I was just made this way, is that I always knew how to find things out on my own. So, like, I always knew how to do research even before I knew how to do formal research. So I always.
And even before Google.
Even before Google, I used to go to the library.
And I
used to even read books. For real. I did. Not just manuals, right? Or PDFs of articles or whatever. I lost my train of thought. But yeah, I mean, you can only be yourself. Oh, I remember. It's because what I talk to my students about, which is critical in my life, is to cultivate practice. Because that's where it all comes from. If you don't practice, it's not going to happen. And if you don't practice consistently, it's not going to happen.
Yes.
And if you don't, and if you leave school and you're going to have to get a day job for a while, so it's going to put like this unbelievable stress on your psyche. If you don't have a practice, your art is going to go away. So if you don't lose it. Yeah, so you have to have that practice, because it gets you through the good times and it gets you through the hard times. But if you don't have a practice, the first hard time you encounter, you're going to be having to do something else that maybe is not what you want to do, or really an expression of who you are. Because maybe who you are really is an artist, but it's just not happening yet. But how do you keep getting better? And also some people are, and I've seen it many times now. Some people are made really early to be able to do things. Like they can pick up an instrument and immediately start playing. But some people are they get it later. They're like latent learners. All of a sudden at 21, wow, the thing clicks.
Yeah.
I mean, Wes Montgomery didn't start playing the guitar until he was 20, 21. He was playing at 21.
Yeah.
And then by the time he was 26, he was playing like Wes Montgomery. Practice. You got to develop a practice, because that's the thing that's going to shield you. And it's going to nourish you and shield you.
Yes. I mean, the traditional way of approaching practice is solo in a room with you and your expression, whatever you're using for your creative practice. For me, I have found that, I have ADHD, so I have found, I definitely did solo practice for many, many years.
Sure.
And that is how I developed technique on the viola, with singing as well, absolutely like daily practice. That's, I think for decades it needs to be that way, or at least a decade. And then, but since then, when I became a mother and life became more complicated, time-wise, I sought out things like choirs, gospel choirs, Joy Yates's choir in Australia. I was part of that. So, yeah, I think there are also like groups and communities that can support having a practice at a certain level that will, you know, if you're going to school, if you're going to college, then you're in an environment.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you're supposed to be.
It's built in. but when you're supposed to be. Yeah.
Your parents think you're practicing.
Yeah. Yeah, but then when you perform, there's a process of letting that go, of being a blank slate, almost.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on what that looks like?
That's the ultimate goal, right? To be able to. Again, it's to not have an ego consciousness. It's just to be no subject object.
To be immersed.
Distinction. Yeah, to be immersed. It's just to be not in action, but to be action. So that you're just flowing.
Yeah.
It's not easy because the critic comes up, things intrude on your focus or your concentration, or you can be focused too much. You know, you can be too tight.
Yeah.
You know, instead of just being
too controlling.
Yeah, instead of being just like really loose and letting things come, which is really where when it happens, that's where for me anyway.
Acting and reacting.
Yeah, and just like being unconscious, you know, they're just like being in that moment, but there aren't any really thoughts involved in that moment. So it's hard to say what was I thinking. People ask what you're thinking. I wasn't thinking at all. You know,
yeah, you're just doing.
I was just doing. I was actioning.
Yeah.
That's a magical moment. That's what we all strive for. Yeah,
absolutely.
Those moments are magical. And those are the magical moments in improvisation and other kinds of music too. But in improv, I found they happen a lot when you're playing.
They do. I think for me, that's just the thrill of it. Yeah. You know, is finding over time that headspace. That it's not a headspace; it's a way of being.
Mm-hmm.
If only we could just stretch it into other areas.
It's just like stay all the time, because really that's how you want to live your life.
It is.
It's like in the moment.
In the moment, connected.
In the moment. I mean, I think that's what happens in those moments. It's like you're in the moment, but you're also seeing a little bit in the future and in the past. It's like you're in all those spaces, but you're inhabiting the present.
And I mean, the research that has been done with brain scan MRIs on jazz musicians that show the areas of their brain that are lit up when they're improvising. I mean, it's on YouTube, but there's a lot of really compelling research that just shows the access to all these different areas of your brain and memory and, you know...
At the same time.
Yes, all at the same time. Congruence, you know, transforms to something that happens in a moment. And I recognize that.
Oh, yeah.
When it happens.
And sound and music are really evocative that way, right? I mean, I was just reading about... how music and sound are used for Alzheimer's patients, you know, and how it helps them sort of reconstitute their memory in some ways because of course of all the associations that they have, and they're not linear, so it doesn't, you know, one of the things that happens with Alzheimer's patients is because they start acting in a non-linear way or thinking in a non-linear way, it's very stressful to them. But music, in the way that it hits your memory, is non-linear, but it evokes like larger association. So it's really great for people who are, it can be really medicinal or therapeutic for people who are going through Alzheimer's. We've been thinking that with my students too. It's like, how do you even start doing something like that? You know, those are the questions. You develop the questions. You figure out, you know, you make some tests. You do the piece. Those things are interesting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. as well. Those things are as interesting to me as making a song. And sometimes more. They're more compelling, just because they're newer or something. And it expands my practice too, because part of my practice is never doing the same thing. Well, it's not really true that I achieve it, but it's always trying to incorporate. Like every project I do, I try to incorporate one new thing into it, even a new idea or a new little something, just so that I'm always growing my technique. Just so that I don't always fall back on the same things that I do all the time.
Yeah.
It's just part of my practice. That I try to, and everyone's going to have a different practice too, but the important thing is to have one, is to sit every day. I remember the story, and I also tell my students the story with, I think it was, I forgot the name of the guy who used to interview Kraft, Robert Kraft, who used to interview Stravinsky. And he was asking Stravinsky about inspiration, about that magical moment. Because, when people don't play music, they think that you have to, they think it's about inspiration, like a magical moment that happens to you, which really, if you're having a magical moment like that, you should probably consider medication. Because something's
a vision.
Yeah, if you're having visions, you know what I mean? You should probably seek a doctor's help. But the older I get, the more I realize, or the more I practice, not the older I get, but the more practice I get as an artist, and this is my 5th decade now. The more I realize that it's for me at this point, it's really not about any intellectualization at all. Like, I don't have to think about being an artist anymore. I don't have to aspire to be an artist. I can't quit being an artist. I've tried to go to law school once or twice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've thought about it. But now I think it's a little late for that.
Probably.
But yeah, all the studying I do, and again, this is a question of practice, that I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to my students. Although I try to get them out of their heads, and and if you're listening and you're thinking about playing music, you gotta get out of your head, because it's not your thoughts that are important. It's how you're reacting with sound, and that doesn't happen on a conceptual level. It really doesn't ultimately. No. You can talk about ideas, and you can talk about, but that doesn't even exist when you're doing it.
No.
It's just like, that's from the outside looking in. It feeds your practice.
In a way, it feeds.
In a way, but it can also
then
distract
it's kind of a mystery. Yeah. There's an element of mystery.
Yeah.
In creating something,
Oh, and by the way, I remember now about what I was saying before. It's very important. It's about inspiration. Where do you find inspiration? And so, we think we need these magical moments. And so Kraft was asking Stravinsky about it, and Stravinsky said, well, if I had to wait for inspiration, I never would have written The Rite of Spring. I never would have written anything. So instead of doing that, I sit down every morning and write for 3 hours.
Yeah, right.
And then deal with the problems that come up. And don't think too much about inspiration. And then the rest of the day, I do what I do. But every day, whether I'm inspired or not, I sit for 3 hours and I write. And that's why I wrote The Rite of Spring. That's why I wrote The Firebird. That's why I wrote, everything that I wrote.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good lesson.
It is.
About practice. If you're waiting for some magical moment, you're thinking that art is magical, and there's an X factor, but it's not magical in a movie kind of way.
It's pieces that come together.
Yeah. Which makes it richer in a way, because it's more organic. It comes from life, but it's really not. But it's really not that 19th century hero. I see the light, and now I'm going to do this thing. If you're waiting for that, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
You're going to be waiting a long time before you, and then you're going to have to pick up a guitar and learn those chords anyway.
That's
going to be harder. So learn the chords, and then wait for the inspiration, and then hope to be inspired. That F chord with the bar.
Yeah.
That one was hard.
Damn that chord.
Remember the lines on my finger.
Thank you so much, Cristian.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome.
Really
it's a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah.
And
I look forward to playing with you.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of playing in front of us.
We do.
And we're overdue. We're gonna make it happen.
Yeah,
we're gonna get it out there for you to listen to.
Absolutely.
Because we have a nice energy together. a nice creative energy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we met, is playing together.
It's true.
Right. Before we were even introduced, we made music together. So that was great. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.